Hey class, let me just set this down. I must say, I never thought this day was going to come. We were in the final days of class, and it was a pleasure getting to share the experience with all of you. It's been a crazy and long 8 weeks, but I am sure glad to finish it by talking to you about one of my favorite topics. And as you can see, that would be fishing, particularly about the red snapper. Here in Florida, as a fisherman, there's one type of fish everyone wants on their dinner table. Just ask anybody, it's the Gulf red snapper. A red snapper is a reddish marine fish that is of commercial value, as a food fish in particular. Since it is so popular, it is, however, very strictly regulated in the Gulf of Mexico. In 2011, Florida alone had an astonishing 3.1 million people fishing. I am a part of that crazy number now, so I can agree with the statement that these fish are absolutely delicious. Because of this, though, so many people are fishing for the species that the Florida commissions have had to put a very unpopular regulation on this snapper. Now that we know a little bit more about the fish, I would like to get into more detail about the regulations placed on them and whether or not they may or may not be having any effects. What are the regulations, you may ask? Well, it all depends on how far from the shore you're fishing when you're catching these fish. State waters start from the shoreline and extend 9 miles into the Gulf of Mexico. Federally owned waters start where the state waters end and extend another 200 more miles into the Gulf of Mexico. Both of these areas have a little different regulation on these fish. For example, last year in state waters, the season was 52 days long, which isn't that bad. But in federal waters, we had a season of a mere 9 days. This upset a lot of fishermen. They must think they own the ocean. I mean, why in the hell would there be 2 regulations on one fish in the same ocean? Well, to add to the short season, there's also restrictions on the gear you can use to catch the red snapper. For example, here I have 2 hooks. This hook here is called a circle hook. You're allowed to use this hook to catch red snapper because if the fish were to swallow your hook, instead of getting caught up on his insides, it gets pulled up into his mouth and catches in the corner of his mouth. This makes it safer for if you catch a smaller fish or undersized fish, you can throw them back and let them be safe. This hook here is called a J hook and it's used more for inshore fishing and for fish that's not going to swallow your hook. Another restriction placed on these fish is the amount of fish you can keep and the size of the fish that you can keep. As an example, last season you were allowed to keep 2 fish per person per day. Each fish had to be a minimum length of 16 inches. You measure this by measuring from the fish's nose to the end of his tail. These restrictions were in both federal and state-owned waters. Why teach a man to fish when he can't keep his catch? Well, it's not like we're going to keep 100 fish per person, but it's not that simple. Due to their popularity as a table fare and as a sport fish, red snapper populations in the Gulf of Mexico have been overfished since the early 1980s. While hugely unpopular, the regulations that were set aside for this fish have slowly led to an increase in the overall population of the fish. Despite the fact that having such a short season could be for the better, how could it be affecting the local community? How do you think it could be affecting people? Well, the shorter seasons mean that there is shorter time for the fish to be sold at the local markets downtown. Since these fish are so popular, it is hard to keep them in the market as it is. Then you make the season shorter, and it makes it worse. While the short season may not be popular, it is allowing the populations to regrow. However, a lot of people around here, and a lot of the guys I fish with, agree that the statistic could be wrong. A lot of the guys I fish with are much older and have been in the area for a very long time. They also have the chance to dive, and they tell me all the time that these fish's numbers have dramatically increased and are almost looking overpopulated at times. If this is true, then the regulations set aside for this fish might not be doing what it's supposed to. For example, one of my friends, local and professional fisherman Nathan Chanu, informed me that it's just going to be worse this season. Recently, an amendment passed that's going to make the snapper season even shorter, down to 1 day, and it makes the majority of the fishery privatized, meaning if you want to keep your fish, you will have to pay the charter boats rather than going out and catching them yourself. This news has upset a lot of people already, and it seems as things are just going to get worse. But how could the statistics be wrong? Well, there's many variables, but when it comes to the big picture, I believe one of the biggest problems could be poaching. I think that there are many people who don't care and will keep undersized fish and too many fish, as well as keeping them out of season. In 2013, the annual catch limit set aside for the fish was a little over 5 million pounds. The amount landed was an astonishing 9.5 million pounds of fish. That's not counting what could be the hundreds of thousands of untracked fish. However, if the statistics are right, here's how the regulations could be helping. Here I have a chart for you of the spawning potential of a Gulf red snapper. Right now, we are just shy of 15% of their rebuilding target. If we keep the regulation and abide by it, we can hit the 25% goal of the spawning potential by 2030. I personally believe that there could be billions of these fish just untrapped. But as you can see, red snapper have an important role in the community here in Florida. I believe that the regulations need to be better monitored so that eventually they can get better. I will do all that I can to make sure I abide by these regulations so that hopefully soon they will be less strict. With a better understanding of what red snapper means to the community and to local fishermen, I believe everyone can help fix this problem. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to my presentation, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.